Hello, and welcome to Ralph Reads, brought to you by TURN, the United Ronin Networks. My name is Ralph Anthony Garcia, also known as R4. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. On this edition of Ralph Reads, I will push forward this mini-series featuring the one and only Donald Goines and what I consider to be a real-life horror story, Dopefiend. Moving on right away, let the reading commence. Chapter 11. Teddy and Snake sat in the car waiting impatiently for Dirty Red and Tiny Tim to come out of the department store. The store closed at 9 o'clock, and they both knew their friends would have to come out before some of the doors were locked. Teddy glanced at the cheap watch he wore. "They got 5 minutes to make it, Snake." "I don't like it," Snake replied. "They should have been out of there 20 minutes ago. I told them before they went in that the store had private cops and all of them wore guns." "You know how they feel about private cops, Snake. A goddamn store cop ain't no different than nobody else. If you going to play, you got to be able to play on floor walkers and private cops alike." Snake snorted. "There's one hell of a difference, Teddy, and that's that fucking gun the cops wear. With cops on the scene, man, if you run, you're taking your life in your hands. With a floor walker, you got a chance of knocking the son of a bitch down and getting away." Both men became silent as they worried over what was keeping their friends. It was in the air. They could almost smell it. Their senses were so sharp from stealing every day that they could feel a bust. On entering the store, they could read roller in the most innocent-looking floor walker. Now, both of them had just about reached the conclusion that their friends had been busted. Suddenly, there was some commotion in the front of the department store. From where they sat, they could see everything that happened. Tiny Tim had come out of the store first, clutching something under his coat. At his heels was a white man. As soon as they reached the pavement, the man grabbed his arm. Dirty Red, coming out of the store behind the white man, made a blurring motion towards his pocket, causing both of the men in the car to groan. The floor walker never knew what hit him. Red shot him in the back twice. As the man slid down to the ground, Red and Tim broke and ran. A box falling from under Tim's coat. Snake cursed. "The damn fools, they're heading straight for the car." Before he could get over his astonishment, 2 men in blue uniforms rushed from the store with drawn guns. Their yells of rage filled the night. "Halt! Halt! Or we'll shoot!" Before the words had cleared the cop's mouth, his partner had aimed and shot. Red staggered, then tried to regain his balance, but another blow in the back hurled him to the pavement. As Tim passed his fallen body, he seemed to tumble. 2 more shots rang out, and Tim pitched over on his face. "Good God Almighty," Teddy moaned. "They done both went and got killed." Snake jumped out of the car and rushed towards the crowd of people that was gathering beside his fallen friends. From the fringe of the crowd, he could tell that both of his friends were dead. Neither man moved. And from the murmuring of the people nearest the bodies, he knew they wouldn't have to worry about any more fixes. Teddy joined him, and they stood silently. They waited until after the ambulance had come and gone before returning to the car. "Well, Teddy said, breaking the silence. At least Red did kill him a peck of wood before going. That ain't worth a shit, Snake growled. Dirty Red is gone. And killing a peck of wood ain't gonna make no difference. When you're dead, you're done. They drove for a while in silence. Finally, Teddy spoke up. We ain't got nothing to sell, Snake. What we gonna do about a duel? My nose is already running, man, and we ain't got a slug. Your nose is always running, Teddy, so that ain't nothing new. He remained silent for a while, but his next words let Teddy know that he was thinking about the same thing. Porky ought to give us a blow on credit after we tell him the news. Yeah, man, he ought to give us one free. All the money Red and Tim and us done spent with him. I know it should at least be worth a free due when we tell him he done lost 2 customers. With the thought of a free fix in his mind, Snake began to drive a little faster. The money they had spent already that day with Porky should have been enough for a fix on credit, Snake reasoned. He desperately tried to find grounds to support his argument in case Porky turned them down. Among the 4 of them, they had already spent over $200 that day. As they pulled up and parked in front of Porky's, Teddy noticed Terry's car parked in front of the hotel across the street. He cursed under his breath. One of these days, he thought, I'll get a chance to fix her little red wagon, and I'll fix it damn good. That's your ex-girlfriend's ride parked over there, Teddy? Snake asked coldly. Yeah, that's the bitch's car, Teddy answered shortly. Why y'all break up, Teddy? If I'd had me a sassy little piece like that, I might have even given up shooting stuff. Nigga, you ain't gonna give up shooting dope till you're as dead as Tim and Red, Teddy replied harshly. Snake tossed back his head and laughed loudly as they started to climb the stairway. My, man, you still got your nose open for that young bitch, ain't you? She sure must have some good lovin' to keep a dope fiend's nose open. He laughed again, then added more seriously, it's really your fault that you blew her, Teddy. I don't know what you was thinking about making a dope fiend out of her. You knew she was going to become a motherfucking dog when she was strung out. That's all right, Teddy replied hotly. I fixed her smart ass properly. I put something on her ass she'll never forget. Every time that bitch gets sick, she'll think about me being the cause of it. Snake stopped at the head of the stairs and looked back at him strangely. I guess you did fix her at that, but you made a snake out of her, and damn if you wasn't the first one she bit. Gigi, one of Porky's doormen, opened the door. He watched them closely as they entered, then closed the door behind him. Where's Porky at? Snake asked quickly. Gigi nodded towards the door. I think he's sleeping, Snake. We've got to see him, Teddy said, with fear balling up in his stomach. The thought of Porky not being available had not entered their minds. Without any apparent concern, Gigi stared coldly at them. I don't see how you going to see him, dig. If he's asleep, I ain't about to wake him up over nothing, dig. Smokey can take care of it, dig. If you don't want nothing, you might as well let the door hit you in the ass. 'Cause Porky done said all that laying out around his dope house got to cease, dig? Teddy stared up at Gigi. Gigi was a touch hot. He liked to fight. It really didn't make any difference to him who it was either. He didn't pick his people. Snake came in with that smoothing ability of his to sway anyone. Dig, Gigi, we got some bad news for Porky, man. All of us was taking off a joint, and the fuzz busted down on us and shot Dirty Red and Tim. Now we need someone with the knowledge to call them white folks and find out, did they do any talking before they died? Or are they dead? Can you dig that? This rang a bell with Gigi. From living in the narrow world of a dope house, he was starved for gossip. Most of the time, they talked about what other addicts were doing, who was doing time, and who just got busted. News about anyone just getting killed or taking an overdose was always exciting enough to kick around for the next week or two. The room full of addicts had started buzzing over Snake's comment. The only person who didn't seem excited was Smokey. She was sitting in Porky's chair with a king-size cooker full of dope, trying to find a vein. Gigi spoke to her. "You want to tell Porky, Smokey?" She looked up at him with eyes that had seen everything. "So what? 2 fucking dope fiends got killed. Big deal. They die every fucking day. Now, what you want me to do? Run all over the house, shouting the news?" Teddy stared at her surprised. It was the first time he had ever heard Smokey say that many words before. Her reply had struck him dumb. He was at a loss for words to make her do what he so desperately wanted. Taking her reply in stride, Snake spoke to her coldly. "Get on up, bitch, and wake Porky up. When you come back, I'll hit you in the pocket." "I don't want no shit out of you when I get back, Snake. You done promised to hit me, and I'm going to hold you to it," Smokey said as she got up and walked towards the bedroom. It was hard for her to get someone to hit her because most of her veins were shot out. Sometimes it took better than an hour before she could find a vein to hit in. Snake walked over and stared down at her cooker of dope. The dope was covered with blood from where she had tried to find the hit. He pulled the spike out. On the arm of the chair besides the cooker was a package of dope. He started to reach for it, but Big Ed's voice stopped him. "You can find something easier to steal than that, Snake. All you got to do is look in a better place. Say, somewhere that ain't connected with this house." Big Ed smiled at him from the couch. "I know you dig what I'm talking about." "You sure look out for Porky's stuff, don't you?" Snake replied sharply. "If you was to ever pay us as well as he does, we will look out for yours the same way," Gigi said, not wanting to be outdone. Smokey came out of the bedroom, followed closely by Porky, who was dressed in a white bathrobe large enough to be a tent. His small, pig-like eyes were red from lack of sleep, and from his expression, you could tell he didn't like the idea of being woken up. This bullshit Smokey was mumbling about better be the real deal, he growled as he crossed the room. "I don't want to find out you tricked her into waking me up just so you can hit for some stuff." Snake quickly explained what had happened, wording it to give the impression they had been in the store too. He gave Porky the name of the department store so he could call and find out what had happened. Knowing that Porky loved gossip, he gave him just enough information to get him aroused. Porky disappeared into the bedroom. After about 10 minutes, he reappeared. "Goddamn almighty!" he exclaimed. "Both them dope fiends done went and got themselves killed." He seemed about to burst with the news. "And that ain't all. Them fools went and killed the honky. The people just told me the whitey died on the way to the hospital. They wanted to know who the hell I was, so I told them I was Tim's daddy." He stopped to catch his breath. They didn't seem to know anything about nobody else being there. I asked if anybody else was with them, but they went to Nut City on me. He stared at Snake and Teddy as though he had just noticed them. "I don't know what you're going to do now. Them stores going to be hot as hell from here on out." Smokey took off her blouse and raised her arm so Snake could try to hit the vein under her armpit. The brassiere she wore was black around the edges from constant wear. Her breasts were so tiny, her brassiere fitted the way a woman's bra would have fit a child of 10. Without taking his eyes off what he was doing, Snake spoke out of the side of his mouth. "We ain't worried about tomorrow, Porky. What we need is a fix now. We'll be able to get out in the morning and do some hustling. I don't know, Porky said as he became alert. How much are you on my books? I don't owe you but $15, Snake replied slowly. He clamped down on his jaw to keep it from shaking. Teddy, seeing a chance to cop a blow, even if his partner didn't, spoke up quickly. I don't owe you nothing, Porky. I paid my bill when I sold you them bedsheets. The subtle inference wasn't lost on Snake. Teddy's eagerness to cop, even though Snake might not get anything, didn't anger him. He knew he would have done the same thing if circumstances had been reversed. Blood gushed up into the work Snake was using as he hit a vein in Smokey's armpit. He cursed as he applied pressure, and the works refused to function. For a minute, he was afraid the tools were stopped up, but just as quickly as they had stopped, they began to work. He pressed down on the bulb. Slowly, the dope ran out of the dropper and into a vein. He held the needle between two of his fingers tightly as he removed the dropper from the end of the needle. Keeping the needle firmly embedded in her vein, he refilled the dropper and stuck it back on the spike. Give them both a $10 pack, Gigi, Porky ordered, finally breaking the silence. I don't know what you gonna do next time, and don't give a fuck. If your mammies both die before you pay me, don't come asking for no credit. Porky started to walk back towards the bedroom and stopped. I don't know if you know it or not, Teddy, but your woman's old man caught her with some dope tonight and put her little smartass out. For a brief moment, anger at Terry's father invaded Teddy's selfish thoughts. Deep down, he knew he still cared for her, but the way they had parted made him want to take a petty revenge on her. He wanted to hurt her, not because she had hurt him, but because he still loved her and couldn't admit it. On the end table beside the couch was a glass of water filled with works. Teddy picked out a set and skeeted water out of the needle. The water came out slowly, so he picked up another set. He continued until he found a set that was open. When he skeeted, the water out the needle was unclogged. Teddy cooked up all of his $10 pack and drew it up in the dropper. He found the vein, hit, sat back, and cleaned up the works before Snake had even finished hitting Smokey. He sat and nodded, waiting patiently for Snake. Snake hadn't spent his time in vain. When he finished helping Smokey, he begged her out of a little girl cocaine and mixed it with his horse after he cooked up the heroin. He dropped the cocaine down on top of the heroin, and it quickly dissolved without the aid of heat. God damn, baby, Teddy drawled. I wish I knew you was gonna fix up a speedball. Why don't you leave the cotton wet for me? Snake flexed the muscle of his arm until one of his veins began to stand out. From the muscular contours of his arm, it was easy to tell he had once been a powerfully built man. His constant use of dope had caused his large frame body to appear undernourished. He pushed the needle deep into a vein on his first try. A dark flow of blood filled the dropper. He loosened the tie around his arm and slowly pressed on the dropper until the blood and heroin in the dropper disappeared. You hoggish son of a bitch! Teddy yelled, disgruntled. You done shot up all the coke! The shot quickly took effect. Snake sat back and relaxed as though he didn't have a care in the world. He grinned over at Teddy. Damn, baby, he drawled slowly. I really forgot about you, man. A while later, both men left the apartment. A freezing rain had begun to fall. They clutched their collars around their necks and ran for the car. It was early morning, and the chilling wind had begun to blow along with the rain, announcing the coming of winter. Teddy waited until Snake had started up the car and turned on the heater. I don't know about you, Snake, but I'd like to see if we can ride down on a sting before we call it a night. It ain't no later than 2 o'clock, so we got plenty of time to see if we can rip something off before daylight. I've been thinking, Teddy, about what happened today. I think I done had enough of boosting to last me a lifetime. Snake lit up a cigarette. If we could take off a big enough score, we could buy some dope and start dealing. The way we're going now, it ain't nothing but a matter of time before something happens to us. That sounds sweet as a motherfucker, Teddy replied quickly. Only I ain't got the slightest idea where we're going to find a sting big enough to put us in business. He thought about the idea a little more, then continued. If we had the money, I know where we could cop some good stuff at, but the man don't do nothing but wholesale, so we'd have to have at least a bill before copping from him. A bill? Snake exclaimed. I ain't talking about no funky $100. I know where a joint is and that we can take off, man. That's got big stuff in it. If you got the heart to get down with me, Teddy, by morning, either we'll have big stuff, say something like $600 or $700, or we'll be in some fucking precinct station. Rain splattered on the windshield in a continuous downpour. If we could get our hands on just $500, Teddy replied, trying to keep the excitement out of his voice, we'd be able to support our habits with no problem at all. We would be able to do a whole lot better than just support our habits, baby, Snake retorted, while his fingers beat out a rhythm on the steering wheel. The way I got it figured, Teddy, if Porky can support that oil burner Smokey got, we should have no problem taking care of ours, plus making a few ends. Shit, Snake, that bag Porky got is so big, he could take care of 5 habits like Smokey's and still make money. That's where you wrong, Snake said as he drove slowly through the deserted streets. He made a right turn and hit the John Lodge freeway. Porky's got a big bag, true enough, but it ain't that goddamn big. Where he makes his money at is on his ability to never run out of dope. You can make money with a small bag if you don't allow yourself to run out of stuff. Man, you could always rap, Teddy said loudly. If a man listened to you, you could make him believe shit don't stink. Here I am, 2 o'clock in the morning, without 50 cents in my pocket, and you got me believing that in the morning, all we're gonna have to worry about is where can we cop at. Snake grinned. If that connect you're talking about is any good, we'll have plenty dope to shoot up this time tomorrow. His voice was full of assurance. In his mind, he had reached the point of either taking off a big score or ending up in prison. There was no middle road. Being a dope fiend, he had to have it. Teddy was a willing partner. He too had reached the point of do or die. Well, we going to take off, Snake. We're going to BE a joint this morning. There was no hesitation in his voice. There was only curiosity as to what kind of crime they were going to commit. For a few minutes, Teddy thought Snake hadn't heard him. He continued to drive without answering until he pulled up the ramp, leaving the expressway. We're going to crash a joint this morning, baby. Crash, crash, crash. Without warning, Teddy's stomach started to act up. He could feel butterflies taking off inside him. For a moment, he feared he might lose his dinner. It wasn't really fear, even though he had never crashed a joint before. He was too much a dope fiend to have an actual fear of breaking the law. It was the idea of the rip. He was up on what he had to do. He had been around too long not to know what a crash meant. He was aware that when you crashed, the whole thing depended on speed if you didn't want to get caught in a freak bust. He watched the neighborhood closely as Snake drove slowly through an all-white suburb. Snake turned up into a shopping center that was well lit but deserted. He parked in front of an appliance store with a large display of portable television sets and radios. After furtively glancing round, both men stepped from the car. There was no hesitation in either of them. They had come for a purpose, and now they moved toward it professionally. Snake carried a tire iron he had taken from under the front seat. As soon as that goddamn light changes and that car pulls off, I'm going to take care of business, Teddy. When you go in the window, man, don't hand me nothing but portable TVs, baby. His voice was hoarse with excitement. With a quick nod, Teddy agreed, never taking his eyes from the street and the car at the light. As soon as the light changed and the car pulled away, he heard a crash. Most of the front window of the store began to fall out. With 3 quick blows, Snake had the window clear of glass. Before the sound of falling glass had diminished, Teddy was through the window. He returned almost instantly and pushed 2 television sets towards the waiting hands. When Snake returned from the car, there were 2 more waiting for him. He rushed back to the car with them in his arms. Quickly, the back seat of the car filled with the sets. "No more room, Teddy," he yelled, taking 2 more television sets and running for the car. He was still to find room for them in the front seat when Teddy joined him, carrying 4 transistor radios. "Hurry, Snake, hurry!" Teddy screamed as he frantically climbed over the televisions in the front seat. "A car stopped out front and it's backing up fast." His urging was not necessary. Snake had seen the car when he ran around the front of his own. It only added wings to his feet. There was never any thought of not running. Snake leapt in the car and put it into gear. He had never cut the motor off as he sped away from the store. He saw the other car pull into the shopping center. He raced for the exit, his foot glued to the gas pedal. The other car pulled up in front of the store and stopped. Teddy, leaning out of the window watching, yelled, "Take it easy, baby. It was just some Ofe kids. I think they're getting in on the action." "You sure, Teddy? You sure?" Snake asked anxiously as he pulled out onto the street. "Slow it down, Snake. We got it made," Teddy replied as he twisted around in the seat and resumed a normal position. "I saw a couple of them woods come out with televisions." Snake slowed down and began to breathe easier. Teddy turned and examined their loot. "We got it made, baby," he exclaimed happily. "We got 4 color TVs and 6 black and whites. We ain't got no problem then. We got enough to buy the dope, plus get a flat to deal it from," Snake answered softly. Chapter 12. Porky walked up and down his flat. He would pace a while, then sit down, but before 10 minutes had passed, he was back up again. He stared out the window, hoping he would see his Cadillac pull up. He couldn't remember ever having seen it like this before. Ever since the bust in New York of over 100 kilos of dope, the problem of copping dope had gotten worse and worse. His connection had been out for over a week now, but he had been managing to hold on somehow. Porky stopped his pacing again to stare out the window impatiently. Smokey had been gone since early morning with Big Ed driving, trying to run down some dope. He wasn't worried about the $5,000 of his money she had. What none of the addicts knew was that Smokey was really his legal wife. In addition to being his connect, she took care of all of his personal business. When he sent money to the bank, she took it. The thought of the $50,000 he had soaked away didn't bring him any satisfaction. Porky didn't deal for the money anymore. It was nice true enough, but he loved the power it brought him. The life or death power. He held the future of every dope fiend who came through his door in the palm of his hand. If he wanted to kill them, all he would have to do was give them some strychnine. To give a drug addict a hot shot was the simplest thing in the world. He saw 2 carloads of dope fiends pull up in front of his house. His lips pulled back in a sneer, and he turned from the window in disgust. Everywhere he looked, there were dope fiends. His apartment was full of them, sitting around, waiting, more impatient than he was. They were on the floor, sitting against the wall. The room was full of them. Tess was sitting near the door on the floor with one of her girlfriends. "Tess," Porky snarled, "go down and tell 'em fools ain't nothing happening." She got up from the floor and did as she was bidden. She was well aware that now was not the time to get smart. Like most of the other addicts, she figured that if any of the pushers scored some time soon, it would be Porky. They all knew Smokey was out trying to get down, and with the oil burner she had on her back, there was little doubt about her taking care of business. If there was any dope in the city, she would find it. Before the addicts could reach the front porch, Tess stepped out of the door in front of them. "Y'all might as well save yourselves a trip, 'cause Porky ain't got no stuff." As they stopped and stared up at her stupidly, she quickly added, "He also said to tell you he ain't got no room for y'all to lay around and wait, so keep on pushing." As the crowd of junkies turned around to leave, someone in the crowd called her a bitch. Tess just stared without anger. She knew how they felt because she felt the same way. Her nose and eyes were running, while her bowels had become undependable. When she sat down, she felt like getting up, and as soon as she got up, she felt like lying down. Hot and cold flashes ran through her, while under her skin, it felt like small insects were crawling around. As the junkies piled into the car to continue their endless search, Tess noticed the look of desperation on their faces and knew that it was a mirror image of her own. They would continue searching for the rest of the night and the following day until they found what they sought. They were now at the point where they would shoot morphine, take yellow jackets, Nembutal capsules, anything to take the edge off. Pergoric would help those who knew how to cook off the alcohol and strain out the camphor. Then it would be fit to inject intravenously. Many of those upstairs had already bought cough medicine with cocaine in it, while the few fortunate ones had come with some Delodid, and others had some precious Dionine. Methadone pills were selling for $3 a pill, number 10s, while number 5s were bringing $2. Tess's stomach lurched as she gaped at the long midnight blue Cadillac pulling up out front. "Oh God," she murmured under her breath, "let it be them." Before the car had completely stopped at the curb, the back door flew open and Smokey came hurtling out. The chilling winter wind whirled around her, tossing light snowflakes over the front of her dress. Her thin fall coat spread out behind her like a cape as she ran toward the front of the house. There was nothing slow-moving about her now. She moved with the speed of a young doe. A car full of addicts pulled up behind the Cadillac. They had seen Big Ed driving Porky's car up on the main street and had followed in the blind hope that Smokey had been lucky enough to break the panic. If anyone could, they believed it would be one of Porky's connections. Big Ed and the other doorman riding shotgun hurriedly followed Smokey toward the house. The sight of so many addicts only clinched the idea in the other addicts' minds. Drug addicts didn't make it a point to run unless something really important was up. Tess spotted the package Smoke clutched in her hand, then turned and ran up the stairs, one step in front of the rushing Smokey. The occupants of the two cars had been seen by Porky from the front window. He cursed as he motioned towards the door. "Goddamn Dopefiends running all over the street like they're crazy. One of you get the fucking door open before the foolish sons of bitches break it down." The sound of thundering footsteps running up the stairs was a rarity, because at any other time, Porky would have had a fit about someone running up his stairway. Because of the panic, though, he realized it was impossible to restrict such abandoned behavior. The addicts in the apartment looked as though someone had given them a new lease on life. Before, they had sprawled out on the floor listlessly. Now, as the news spread that Smokey was back, they all sat up, losing their bewildered look, caught up in the anticipation of drugs being plentiful again. Terry, sitting on the couch beside Minnie, asked in a hushed voice, "Do you really think they copped?" They have been waiting for over 30 hours now. Neither woman leaving her spot on the couch, afraid that if they left, they couldn't get back in. Minnie had been hoping and praying that Smokey would cop, but she was afraid now to become too excited, aware that if Smokey hadn't copped, she would have to commit herself to a hospital or kick cold turkey. Smokey came through the door and headed straight toward the bedroom. The addicts surrounded Tess, asking questions. The word spread through the room that Smokey had copped. Big Ed made his way across the room and entered the bedroom, closing the door behind him. Inside the bedroom, everything was laid out on the bed. A large mirror with a sifter lying beside it was already in place for use when the time came. Small amounts of milk sugar had been meticulously measured out and placed out of the way on the edge of the mirror. By the time Big Ed entered the bedroom, he had to step over Smokey's coat in the middle of the floor, where she had dropped it in her hurry to reach the bed. She was propped up on the edge of the bed, sifting heroin through the sifter. She ran the drug through until there were no more lumps in it. She continued to strain it until she had it just the way she wanted it. As Smokey worked, her mind was busy. It had been a long time since they had allowed themselves to get caught like this, but it was one of the hazards of being a drug user. Whenever a really big bust went down, the users in the streets paid dearly for it. The panic had reached nationwide proportions. She smiled to herself as she thought of how lucky she was to have a man like Porky. She had made sure she would have some kind of dope to keep her sickness off. "How many will it take?" Porky asked impatiently from the side of the bed. "It won't take much more than a fork cut and still be anything," Smokey replied, not stopping her hands, moving smoothly. Porky opened the envelope she had given him, quickly counted the money, then counted it again. "Hell, it ain't but $3 left in here, Smoke." "The bastard charged $1 for each piece, Porky," she answered, not bothering to look up. The thought never entered her mind that he would doubt her, and he did. "God damn, that's twice as much as this pure is worth." Porky quickly calculated up the price he had paid for the dope. "Ed, you go out there and tell them junkies that I ain't selling nothing but $20 packs. $20 packs, you hear me? You can also tell them that if they ain't but one goddamn penny short, they can't cop." His barrage of words didn't surprise Smokey in the least. She knew him so well, she could have bet he would raise the price. It was all a matter of business, though. They had to pay double price for the junk, so quite naturally, they would have to up their price. "Send Dave in here to pack up this shit, too," Porky yelled at Big Ed as he went out the door. Smokey finished cutting the dope, walked over to the dresser, and took out her works and cooker. She removed a small spoon from the drawer. "You gonna use a $10 spoon, Porky, to measure up the $20 packs?" "You goddamn right I am," he growled. "What did you think I was gonna use, bitch? A quarter spoon?" She ignored his outburst and went back to the bed to fill her cooker up with stuff. Dave entered the room without knocking. He was short and thin, a brown-skinned man nearing 50. His hair was almost completely gray, while his thin mustache was speckled with gray. Porky picked up 2 album covers and dropped them on the bed. He sat down across from the pile of dope. "I want you to pick up all that stuff, Dave, and I'll give you a blow when you finish. Don't let your fingers get sticky," he added, "'cause I'll be right here on the case." Big Ed stuck his head in the door. "You want me to start collecting some of this money, Porky? Everybody out here keeps trying to push it in my hand. Seems they got the idea they might not cop before you run out." "Not yet, Ed. Tell them fools we ain't gonna run out no time soon, so rest easy," Porky Porky wished the words were true as he said them. He knew the dope would last a while because he had 10 pieces, but as big as his business was, he'd be out of dope in less than 2 days. Gigi came into the room in time to answer the phone. "It's Snake on the line, Porky. He wants to know if you're all right." With a grotesque smile revealing his yellow teeth, Porky reached for the phone. Well, if it ain't the big dope dealer himself. "What can I do for you, King Snake?" On the other end of the line, Snake could feel the blood rushing to his head. Instantly, the thought ran through his mind. They got some dope. "You all right, Porky?" he asked, unable to control the pleading note in his voice. All at once, Porky began to laugh. The feeling of importance filled his very being. He could almost reach out and touch the vibration of fear in Snake's voice. He knew Snake was afraid of being denied the opportunity to cop from this more influential dealer. For a moment, Porky toyed with the idea of just turning him down, but his capricious disposition, mixed with his greed, was too much. "The only thing I can let you have, Snake," Porky said, his agile mind adding swiftly, "is a piece of cut stuff." On the other end of the line, Snake caught his breath. A piece of stuff? He hadn't hoped for such good luck. He glanced around the room at the addicts watching him. He could almost make his money back off them. "How much, Porky?" $400 for one piece, Porky replied, making sure he had his fish caught in the net. "I'm selling $10 packs for $20 right now, Snake, so you shouldn't have no problem getting your money back out of it." Porky mentally counted up his initial investment. After spending $1,000 for a piece of pure, cutting it 4 times, which gave him 5 pieces, selling one of those cut pieces for $400, he was left with 4 pieces of cut dope. At that rate, he would have paid $600 for 4 pieces of cut dope. When he broke that down, it would come out to about $150 a piece. Not bad at all, he reasoned as he waited for Snake's reply. After a short debate with Teddy, Snake hurriedly answered, "We're on our way, Porky. Hold that piece for us." He hung the phone up and spoke to one of the dope fiends in his overcrowded apartment. "If anyone comes to the door, Jake, tell them I went to cop. I'll be back in an hour." He hesitated for a moment. "Don't let nobody else in, though, until we get back. Just tell them everything's gonna be all right." Teddy spoke up from the door. "You better tell them that it ain't gonna be no more $10 packs. All we're gonna have is $20 packs or 3 caps for $15. They left the apartment together. Neither man was sick. They had bought some paregoric earlier and cooked it up. "That bastard is sure sticking it to us, Snake. 400 fat ones for some cut stuff. How much you figure we can make out of it?" Snake remained silent, counting to himself. "The way I got it figured, Teddy, is that we can get at least 20 packs out of a 4 of dope. All right? We're going to get 4/4 out of a piece, so that should give us at least 80 packs. 80 packs at $20 a pack should bring us somewhere near $1,600. I'm not counting what we should use ourselves, but there's plenty room." They climbed in the late model car Snake had bought since they started dealing. It wasn't brand new, but it was only 2 years old and still ran smoothly. Snake started the motor up, but before he could back up, a car full of addicts pulled up beside him. "You all right?" one of the dope fiends yelled out of the back window. "I'll be back with some skag in less than an hour," Snake replied. "You sure, Snake? You sure? We've been hearing that bullshit for the past 2 days now. Every goddamn body will be right back. Everybody will be right back. But we don't ever see nobody coming in the door with it." "Don't worry," Snake answered. "I ain't just talking out the side of my neck. I done already called, and the stuff is there. Only thing about it is, it's going to cost $20 for a $10 pack, and we ain't giving up no credit." A noisy chorus of voices answered him. Most of the addicts were hungry over the extravagant price, but their mutterings died down as the thought sank in that Snake really was on his way to pick up some dope. The driver pulled the car out of the way so Snake could get past. Before he could get away from the curb, a cab pulled up beside him with 2 women in it, one white and one colored. "Snake," the colored woman yelled. "You all right, honey?" she asked while wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Yeah, Shirley, everything's sweet as it could be." Before he had finished speaking, she was climbing out of the cab. Her partner paid the driver and jumped out on the other side. Snake raised his eyebrows at the other girl. "She's all right," Shirley said, coming up beside the car. "We work out of the same hotel. She left her man a couple of days ago, so we've been staying together." "Do she use?" Teddy asked from the passenger side of the car. "Carrie," Shirley said as soon as her girlfriend walked up, "that little man over there wants to know if you use." Carrie laughed lightly. She was tall and blonde, with a long, keen nose and pale blue eyes. As she leaned down, Teddy could tell she used because her eyes were beginning to run, and she kept sniffling. "Fuck all that shit," Snake said and opened the car door. "Come on, we got business to take care of." Both women climbed into the back of the car. Teddy turned around in the seat and stared at Shirley. She was a tall, light-colored woman with a dazzling smile. She had been on stuff for over a year, but it had not caught up with her yet. She still had a beautiful shape and was able to make quite a bit of money whoring out of the large white hotels downtown. She was one of the few black women Teddy had ever seen with freckles. "Your friend worked downtown with you, Shirley?" he asked as Snake pulled away from the curb. "Yeah, baby, and she's the only cool fae down there, too." Shirley lit a cigarette before adding, "Would you believe that a good whore like her ain't got no man either?" Without turning his head, Snake growled, "You two whores ain't nothing but sisters under the skin, Shirley. What you got planned? You choose me and Carrie ends up with Teddy?" Both women laughed. Now that the fear of not copping was over, both women started to relax. "What's wrong with that, Snake?" Shirley asked. "Nothing, except I know that you're a bag-chasing bitch, and it looks like your partner might be following in your footsteps," Snake answered coldly. Ever since they started dealing, women have been no problem. Each night, they would have to run the female drug addicts out before they went to sleep. He turned on the block where Porky lived and parked. The street was jammed with cars. Everywhere he looked, he could see a car full of addicts waiting for their buyer to come back. Teddy cursed. "Damn, you don't have to worry about whether or not Porky got any stuff. Just look at the cars, man. Man, every dope fiend in the city must be at his house." "I better hurry up before he changes his mind, too," Snake answered as he climbed out. "You gonna wait until I get back, Teddy?" "Yeah, man. I think I'll keep the women company. You ain't gonna shoot no stuff while you in there, are you?" The question went unanswered because Snake was already on his way across the street. When he finally got inside the apartment, he had almost had to fight his way through the milling crowd. Addicts were everywhere. Minnie and Terry were still in the apartment. They had finally got waited on. Minnie split the $20 pack. Terry stared at her small amount. She realized that it would not be enough to take her sickness off if she snorted it. Minnie read her mind. "You better get you a set of works, honey, if you want to feel that dope." For a moment, a feeling of being utterly lost washed over her. In the back of her mind, she knew she was ready to go over the last barrier. There was no way around it. She had to get rid of her junk sickness, and the dope she had was not enough. As she stared at it, she wondered if it would be enough even if she shot it. "Could I use that set of works you had?" she asked the addict sitting next to her. He removed a neatly wrapped bundle from his coat pocket. "Just be sure you clean them out when you finish using them," he said, and held his set of tools out to her. When Snake passed the couch, he stopped for a moment and stared as an addict hit Terry in the arm. As he pressed the dropper, her eyes closed. Snake walked on past. It was just another step down the line for her, he thought. Not surprising, really. Just about any user would eventually start shooting instead of snorting if he had any veins to go in. In the long run, it was a whole lot cheaper to shoot than to snort. He reached the bedroom door and knocked. "Who the hell is that now?" a voice yelled from the other side of the door. Snake tried the door. When it opened under his hand, he walked in. "What's happening, Porky? What's the real deal?" he yelled across the bedroom. Porky was busy trying to hit his woman in the groin. "What What's wrong with you, nigga? Don't you believe in waiting until someone lets you in the door? He snarled. The day's events had just about worn Porky out. He had never seen the likes of this before. His two dogs stood up and growled as Snake walked across the floor. You still got that piece for me, ain't you, Porky? He asked nervously. Porky nodded towards Big Ed, who was standing in front of a mirror trying to hit in the neck. He got it. If I had known it was going to be like this, Snake, I'd never have sold that piece to you. Before Porky could change his mind, Snake pulled out his money and started counting out the $400. He walked over to the dresser and laid the money in front of Big Ed. You think you'll have enough to sell me another piece tomorrow, Porky? Hell no! Porky exclaimed. Fuck no! You're getting a goddamn break on this fourth now. You think I'll go for the same fucking thing again tomorrow? Pulling the needle out of Smokey's groin, Porky cursed. This goddamn bitch ain't got no veins nowhere. I should make her take her funky ass to the hospital and kick. How about trying and find a hit for me, Snake? Smokey asked, her voice rising slightly. Her hand shook as she held the works out toward him. You might be able to hit that same vein as the last time you hit me. I ain't been back in there since, 'cause I don't let just anybody hit me under the arm. She pulled her dress down and stood up. For a brief moment, Snake wanted to say no, but after looking in her face, he knew he couldn't turn her down. He waited until she removed her blouse and raised her arm. As he probed for the vein with his finger, he thought cruelly to himself, at least the bitch changed bras since last time. After about 10 minutes, he finally hit a vein. The dark blood that filled up the dropper told him he had a hit. Before the works had time to clog up, he pushed down slightly on the bulb, and the blood and dope disappeared in the hidden vein under a mass of dark hair. Before Snake reached the car, Porky had received a long-distance call from Chicago. He was now beginning to get some action on all the calls he had made in the past few days. He talked quietly into the receiver for a few moments, shook his head in agreement, then hung up. He walked slowly towards the door and opened it. Everybody out, he said. As Big Ed passed him, he whispered, Get ready, Ed. We'll be leaving for Chicago in the next few minutes. As soon as the room emptied, he smiled gleefully at his woman. Get me $6,000 together, Smoke. I'm getting ready to ride out, and when I get back, we'll bust this panic wide open. Smokey moved off the bed with more speed than she ordinarily displayed. Who was that, Porky? Sid? That's right, baby. He said I could get all the pee. Pure. I want it at $600 apiece. He thinks he's charging me top dollar for it, but I'll make so much money off it, we'll be nigger rich by the time I'm finished. Smokey walked over to the corner nearest to the bed where the dog slept. She pulled back a floor rug that the dogs lay on most of the day. Next, she removed 3 boards from the floor, then pulled out a small tin box. Removing a key from around her neck, she opened it. You still got that $3,000 I brought back earlier, Porky, in your pocket, so all you need is $3 grand more. Better give me 4, girl. You never can tell what might happen when you're in Chicago. He continued to dress as he talked over his shoulder to her. Count now how much we got left in the box, too. If it's too much, you better get ready to make a trip to the bank. Smokey sat down on the floor with her back against the wall between the dogs. That don't leave but $2,000 with me, Porky. I ain't counted up what we done made so far today, but it ain't hardly over $1 grand. His eyes caught hers briefly as he dropped his pants. You better hold out a piece of stuff for yourself in case I should be longer than what I planned. He slipped on the pants to his suit and put on a gold silk shirt. The suit he wore was very expensive, a black silk mohair. After dressing, he stuck a large cigar in his mouth. Porky actually disliked smoking them, but thought they went with his big shot appearance. He stuck 2 more cigars in his pocket. I should be back before daylight in the morning, but if I ain't, don't worry. Oh yeah, if anyone wants to buy a piece of stuff, sell it for $500. You can call Snake and Teddy up and let them know they can cop another piece, only it will cost them an extra $100. Porky walked over to the closet, pushed two of Smokey's minks aside, and pulled out his cashmere overcoat. Smokey got up off the floor and went to the closet. She pulled out 3 hat boxes and set them on the floor. In each hat box, there was a Knox 100, each one specifically made to order. Smokey took a sincere interest in seeing that her man was dressed right, and he did the same thing in regards to her. They shared a tacit understanding when it came to clothes. Though neither really cared about dressing, they had just about everything a person could want in their closets. Porky walked over to the bedroom window and glanced out, trying to gauge the weather. "It might snow while we're on the highway," he said offhandedly, not really speaking to her, but voicing his thoughts out loud. It was already starting to get dark, though it was still early in the evening. Smokey held out Porky's hat to him. He broke the stingy brim down and set the hat ace-deuce across his head while he was adjusting it in the mirror. Smokey stuck her hand under the pillow and came out with a small .38 Derringer pistol. She silently held the gun out to him. He stuck it down in his huge waistline, his enormous stomach completely covering the small pistol. Big Ed and Dave led the way down the stairs, with Porky following them closely like some monstrous prehistoric beast. Outside, the chilling wind tugged at their clothes as they made their way towards the long Cadillac Brougham sitting at the curb. Porky climbed in the back, taking up most of the seat while his gunmen got in front. He waved at Smokey, who was watching him silently from the window, and the large car leaped away from the curb. 5 hours later, they roared in off the highway. Chicago's lights seemed to wink at them as Big Ed steered the car off the freeway and into the heart of a black ghetto. Porky gave him directions from the back seat until finally they pulled up in front of a motel. Dave jumped out and ran over to check them in. He came back, dangling a key. "How long you figure we're gonna be over here, Porky?" he asked as he climbed back into the car. "That's for me to know, nigga, and for you to find out," Porky replied sharply. Big Ed drove the car up the driveway of the motel until he found their unit, then parked in front of the door. They all piled out. Dave removed a small overnight bag from the glove compartment and carried it in. The motel room was similar to motel rooms all over the country. Small, neat, with a dresser and tiny kitchenette. Porky dropped his coat on the bed and picked up the phone. He gave the unit number of the motel to the person he called and hung up. 20 minutes later, they heard the sound of a car pulling up beside theirs. Porky motioned to Dave to go into the bathroom, while Big Ed continued to measure out small amounts of milk sugar on the dresser with a $10 spoon. Porky peeped out the window as someone knocked softly. Satisfied that it was the right person, Porky opened the door. Sid walked in with a small, weasel-faced man following him. Sid was short and fat, with a jet-black complexion. He twisted a cigar around his mouth as his small pig eyes swiftly scanned the room. He noticed the partially open bathroom door. "Who the fuck you got in there, Porky?" he asked sharply, his hand slipping under his overcoat. The question caught Porky by surprise. "Just a little precaution to make sure I don't get ripped off while I'm over here," Porky answered as he removed the money from his pocket and laid it on the dresser. Sid ignored the money. "Get him out here," he commanded harshly. He stepped back against the wall. His bodyguard leaned against the door, his hand conspicuously bulging from his overcoat. Dave, get the fuck out here," Porky yelled, wiping the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. The door opened quickly, and Dave walked out. His face twitched nervously. He could feel the muscles contract, but couldn't control them. Guns and violence were something he had an innate fear of. He knew better than anyone that he was completely out of his place trying to act the part of a gunman. Sid nodded towards his bodyguard. The man moved quickly to the bathroom and kicked open the door. Finding it empty, he turned back and faced the room. With a cold smile that never touched his eyes, Sid said, "Just checking, Porky. I wouldn't want to walk into no well-planned stick-up either." The room was full of hostility. Neither person trusted the other. Sid picked up the money and counted the bills quickly with a sureness that comes only to those used to handling large amounts of money. Again he nodded. His gunman moved to the window and pulled back the drapes. He removed a small flashlight from his pocket and blinked it twice. Porky's heart skipped a beat. There was a fear inside the room. Everyone knew that the first wrong step would fill the small bedroom with violence. "It's just my woman, Porky, bringing the stuff in," Sid explained quietly. "I don't take no chances with people from out of state. I know you know what I'm talking about." It didn't need explaining. Porky knew just what he meant. His city was beginning to get a reputation as a city full of informers. He stuck a cigar in his mouth, his stomach swelling with knots of fear. The knock came almost unexpectedly. Big Ed moved over to the door and glanced out. His hand clutched a .38 automatic. "It better be a goddamn woman," he growled. He relaxed and opened the door, holding the gun down so she wouldn't see it. A small, light brown-skinned woman entered. She was dressed expensively. At the sight of Porky, she hesitated for a brief second, shocked by his hugeness. Her 300-pound Sid was dwarfed by comparison. Porky looked to her like an expensively dressed gorilla smoking a cigar. "Give me that stuff, woman," Sid ordered. "I got 10 pieces, Porky, that you could put a 6 on. Porky took the stuff from her outstretched hand and held it out to Big Ed, who pocketed his gun and carried the dope to the dresser. He opened one of the packages and filled up his $10 spoon and sprinkled the dope on top of 6 piles of milk sugar, which he had moved to the center of the dresser top. He sifted the dope and milk through his sifter over 8 times until they were thoroughly mixed together. Then he measured out a $10 spoon and dropped it in the cooker. Dave started cooking the dope up for him as he tied up his arm. Quickly, he found the vein, filled the dropper up with dope, and hit. Impatiently, Porky waited for his judgment. "Well?" Porky asked, unable to hold back any longer. "Is the shit worth it?" Big Ed closed his eyes and wet his lips as though he were tasting the dope. "It ain't nothing to write home about, Porky, but it will sell. It's just about as good as the stuff we got now." Everybody in the room seemed to have been holding his breath, waiting for the decision. Sid laughed, relieving some of the tension in the air. "Is that good enough for you, Porky?" he asked as his fingers closed over the money. Staring at all the loose dope on the dresser, Dave got excited and started to fart loudly. Porky laughed. "That's one way I can always tell dope, Sid," he said in an amiable tone. "Every time that nigga get around some dope, he starts to fart." Both men laughed agreeably as they watched Dave rush to the empty cooker and push a small amount of dope into it and drop water on top of it. Sid picked up the money and started toward the door. "Anytime you want to get down, Porky, just give me a ring. It's nice doing business with you." His bodyguard peeped out the door first, while Sid gave the envelope full of money to his woman to carry. It was just another precaution he was taking, one Porky was familiar with. If anyone got busted, she would be found with the money, and it was much simpler to fight a sales case on your woman than one on yourself. Even if the woman was found guilty and sent to prison, she was easy to replace. As soon as the door closed behind them, Porky wrapped up the 10 pieces of pure he had bought. "Get them works cleaned. We're leaving," he snapped. "That's yours and Dave's, Ed," he said, pointing towards a small amount of dope they had cut up to test. He waited until Ed had picked up his dope. "Let's go!" Porky yelled, nervous now that the business had been completed. Dave snatched the works out of his arm, wishing he could have jacked off the works a couple more times. He rinsed out the works quickly. Porky and Big Ed were already at the door. "Here," Porky said, handing Big Ed all of the dope. "Bring your goddamn ass on now, Dave, or we gonna leave you in this fucking ass motel." Dave ran out the door behind him. "You want me to turn the key in first, Porky?" Porky climbed in the back of his Broham, goddamn the key, he snarled. They can keep the deposit and shove it up their ass for all I give a fuck. He settled back in the comfortable cushions of his car. In less than 10 minutes, they were back on the highway. They hadn't been in Chicago an hour, and now they were on their way back home with a car full of dope. Chapter 13. The wind rattled her windows, and she could feel a draft coming through the broken pane from where papers covered the jagged hole. The noise from her single radiator had kept her awake most of the night. The steam hissed constantly, and the pipes rattled loudly. When she became fully awake, her first thoughts were fear-ridden. It was not the first time she had awoken with this nagging feeling of dread for the coming day, nor would it be the last. Terry rolled up and sat up. Her blanket slipped down to the floor of her bed, and as she tossed back the sheets, her lovely breasts could be seen through the transparent nightgown. Only there was no one to admire her in her lonely room. Her nose was running as though she had a cold. But it was not from a cold. It was past time for Terry to have her morning fix. She sniffed as she climbed out of the bed and made her way stiff-legged to the dresser. She fumbled around, searching for old, used pieces of cotton. After she found 5 of them, she put them in the cooker and poured water in them. She lit 2 matches and held them under the cooker until the water got hot. She pulled out her dropper and stuck it in the cooker, drawing up the stuff, hoping and praying that it would be enough to get her sickness off. After shooting the water into her arm, she cursed angrily. It hadn't been enough. She was still sick. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on her door. She could hear Minnie hollering on the other side. "Wake up, Terry! Somebody's taking your car away!" Terry ran to the door, then turned around and ran back and grabbed her coat off the only chair in the room. She put it on and ran out of the room, following Minnie, running barefooted. They got outside just in time to see a tow truck pulling away from the curb. She stopped as the icy snow began to freeze around her bare feet. A sob escaped from her as she watched her car disappear down the street. "Who do you think it was?" Minnie asked brokenheartedly. It was a deadly blow to her, losing that car. For the past 2 months, she had come to rely upon the transportation. Her stomach had become so large from her pregnancy that it was almost impossible for her to catch a trick. Her only chance of making money had been when Terry took her around to the shopping center to shoplift. Both women stared after the car, dumbfounded. They stood in the street watching long after it disappeared, as though some freak chance of fate would bring it back. Terry was openly crying now, tears running down her cheeks. She happened to turn and look up to find Porky's evil face leering out of his window. He had known her car was being repossessed even before she had. He licked his lips as he watched her from his window. Slowly, he stuck his tongue out at her, knowing she understood what he meant. He watched as her head jerked up and fire leapt from her eyes. Some of the old arrogance was still in her, but he knew it wouldn't last long. Just wait until the junkie sickness hits her, then he'd see how proud she would be. "What we gonna do, Minnie?" she asked childishly as she retraced her steps back towards the hotel. "I ain't even got nothing to wake up on." Minnie took one last look down the deserted street. "I ain't either, Terry. I had a little left from last night, but I shot that this morning before I went outside." They walked side by side into the hotel. "Porky ain't gonna give us no credit unless you give him some sex, Terry, so asking him for credit is one wasted effort." The enormity of her problem began to penetrate her consciousness. "Ain't no sense thinking about asking Teddy to give us some credit," Terry said. "'Cause since he copped that white girl, he don't even want to talk to me." The mere thought of Teddy aroused her anger. "Anyway, I wouldn't ask that little son of a bitch for nothing if I was dying." "Well then, what we gonna do?" Minnie asked, repeating her question. Minnie led the way into her room as they sat on the bed. Terry, I know how much you dislike the idea, but ain't but two things we can do. She waited for a minute to make sure she had Terry's attention. We can both try to get committed in a hospital, and that ain't too likely. Or we can go up on the street and try to stop a trick. At the mention of selling her body, Terry's face twisted into a frown. Before she could comment, Minnie rushed on. We ain't got no other choice, Terry. Either you can wait until you're real sick, girl, and by then it ain't gonna make you no difference about turning no tricks, or go and do it now. Terry's conscience set up a small warning. She could see herself slowly retrogressing. Each week, it seemed as though she would end up breaking another principle. Soon, all of her little morals will be gone, and then she wondered what would she be? Nothing. The thought of trying to kick entered her mind, but just as quickly she rejected it on the grounds that she was too sick today. Maybe tomorrow she'd get up and try to find a hospital, but today she would have to have one more do. Minnie began to sense her surrender and pushed her point home. It ain't as simple as some people think, Terry. I'll show you how to hold your legs so you won't get female trouble. Minnie waited eagerly for Terry's reply. Everything depended on Terry. Minnie knew she had become too large to make money herself. There was a hardness in Terry's voice as she answered. I guess one or two will kill me. She didn't bother to explain to Minnie that the only man she had relations with was Teddy, and that had only been on 3 different occasions. She knew that her reluctance in sex was not because of her being frigid or anything like that, but simply that she had never wanted to have children out of wedlock. Maybe I've always been too old-fashioned, she reasoned with herself as she got up and started towards the door. I'm going to get dressed, Minnie. I won't be but a few minutes. Minnie tried to hide the pleasure she felt. Now everything would be all right, she reasoned. Once Terry, with her looks, learned how to turn tricks, it wouldn't be hard for her to support both her habits. With slow deliberation, Terry put on her clothes. She took her time and made up her face so that she looked her best. Next, she slipped on a pair of high black boots that matched the black miniskirt she wore under her tan minicoat. Her beautiful legs were displayed to perfection. When she stepped out of the room, she looked like anything but a dope fiend. After Minnie showed her how to hold her legs, they started out the door. If you should get a trick that wants some head, Terry, it's easier than having him jump up and down in your stomach. Terry stopped in the hallway and put her hands on her hips. If you're talking about me putting my mouth down there on some man, you've got another thing coming. Dumbfounded, Minnie stared at her. Well, I was just mentioning it to you. Some of them want you to go that way. Terry's nature was becoming harder every day. Her voice was harsh and cold as she stared straight at Minnie. I hope you don't think you're going to be out there just supervising, because that's the last thing I need. I don't see nothing wrong with your head. It's only your belly that's swelling up as big as a house. With a lightheartedness that she didn't feel, Minnie tried to laugh. Oh, girl, I'm planning to take care of whatever business you can't handle. It was early in the day. When they reached the corner, Terry found out it was harder than she thought to sell one's body. They had been out on the corner for over an hour, but still neither one of them had broke luck. At first, Terry had been ashamed to yell at the passing cars with white men in them, but as the morning wore on and her monkey began to act up, she found herself whistling and yelling with more vigor each time. Finally, a car slowed down and turned the corner. Terry ran down the street after it as though she had been doing this all her life. The man behind the steering wheel was white and heavyset with a large gut. After they talked for a few minutes, he agreed to spend $20 with her. She was the most attractive whore he had ever seen on the street. She climbed in the car and directed him back to her hotel. When they entered, the old woman in the caretaker's apartment smiled her toothless smile at her as they went up the stairs. When they entered the room, Terry stood nervously against the door. She could feel the butterflies acting up in her stomach. She gritted her teeth. Well, I've come this far, she told herself, so there's no turning back now. The John removed $20 from his wallet and held it out to her. "Here you go, girlie," he said in a nasal-sounding voice. She accepted the money from his outstretched hand and put it in her bra. "You want me to take off everything?" she asked in a frightened voice. The trick seemed surprised. Yes." "Do what you want to do," he replied, sitting on the edge of the bed and watching her closely as she began to undress. He caught his breath as she came out of her dress. Those golden brown thighs were the loveliest he had ever had the delightful opportunity of laying his eyes on. He stared in fascination. "My God," he uttered hoarsely. Terry stood before him in only her bra and panties. He quickly began to shed his clothing. She stretched out on the bed, waiting, trepidation in her heart. The only thing that stopped her from running out of the room was her terror of the horror of drug sickness. The John climbed on the bed beside her. She closed her eyes as she felt his hands fumbling with her panties. As though in a dream, she could feel him tugging them down over her hips, then around her legs, and finally down to her ankles. She opened her legs slightly as she felt him climbing between them. Suddenly, she felt something wet on her stomach. Next, it moved down to her legs. Then she felt his hands parting her legs. As she opened them, she could feel his lips moving coarsely towards her vagina. Almost immediately, she felt his warm, hot tongue invade her vulva. Her whole body turned a dark red as she blushed, embarrassed by her first experience of oral sex. His darting tongue started a tingling sensation inside her womb as it leapt from one tender spot to another. Against her will, she could feel her legs opening wider. Her hips began to move in jerks. Suddenly, without warning, an orgasm shook her whole body. She jerked and twisted from side to side as her sexual excitement reached a climax. The John raised himself up quickly and inserted his organ in her. Just as soon as he entered her, she could feel him discharging within her body. After she had washed up, the trick asked about going again. For a moment, Terry debated with herself about putting him out, but the thought of more money won out. After going through the same routine again, the John got up and dressed $35 poorer. Terry waited until he had left the building with a promise to see her the following week. Before she went down to Minnie's room, Minnie was standing in the hall waiting. "Damn, Terry, I thought he was going to stay up there with you forever, honey." Terry flashed a $20 bill, already planning on using most of the money for her own habit. He didn't stay up there that long, did he? Not if he was spending that much money. It wasn't as bad as you thought it was it? "Not really," Terry answered quickly. "Minnie, would you run up to the store and get me some cigarettes and matches? I'll go over to Porky's and cop for us." Slowly, the smile left Minnie's face. "You're going to give me a blow, ain't you, Terry?" she asked in a pleading voice. "Of course I'm going to give you a toot, honey. I just want you to run to the store for me. And when you get back, I'll have you a $10 pack waiting." They went out the door together. Terry held a dollar bill toward Minnie. "Get some pop, too," she said. Terry watched Minnie waddle up the street. She thought coldly, "Minnie better get her mind together, 'cause I sure ain't about to try and keep up no two habits." Porky opened the door and let her in. He smiled. "I see you done went into business for yourself, Terry," he said, leering. "I can spend more money with you, girl, than any 3 peckerwoods you pick up on the street. You keep that in mind." Terry's eyes caught his in a calculating glance. "I don't feel in the mood for any copulating with dogs, Porky. Your taste runs in a very weird bad, baby. I don't think I'm able to handle it." "Ain't no dogs involved in what I'm talking about, Terry. Just you and me," he said flatly. "Let me get a half a fourth from you for $25 then. Show me you like me a little," Terry said and pinched him on one of his fat cheeks. Before he could reply, Smokey spoke up from the large chair she was sitting in. "The little bitch thinks she's playing on you, Porky," she said it loudly so the whole room could hear. "Take care of your own business, bitch," Porky growled angrily, staring around the room at the addicts as if daring one of them to say something. Smokey turned her back and continued trying to find another hit on one of her veins. Ever since the panic, she and Porky had gotten closer together. They had amassed a huge sum of money before the dope began to flow back into the city. Okay, Terry, I'll let you have a half a fourth for that. One of these days, you and me are going to have one hell of a freak party. You can bet on that, Porky said. Terry waited until Big Ed brought her the dope before finding some paper that had dope in it before. She shook out a small amount, making sure that it was less than a $10 pack would be, and wrapped it up the same as all of Porky's packs. Ain't you getting cute? Porky's loud laughter rang out. I'll just bet that little amount is going to your smart-ass friend. Her eyes narrowed slightly, but she continued to fold the tiny pack. It ain't your concern, one way or the other, she answered sharply. Terry finished folding it and got up. Big Ed let her out the door. As she passed him, he reached out and rubbed her ass. Your mammy should have taught you to keep your hands where they belong, she yelled over her shoulder as she continued down the stairs. When she got out on the street, Minnie was standing in the cold waiting for her. Did you get that for me, Terry? Did you get it? She asked in a frightened voice. Ever since Terry had left to cop without her, she had harbored the fear that Terry would return without any dope for her. Without replying, Terry held out the tiny package to her. Minnie snatched at the package. It was as though she couldn't really believe it was hers until she held it in her hand. Thank you, honey. I'll pay you back for this, don't worry. Shrugging her shoulders, Terry led the way into the hotel. I'll be in my room if you want me, Minnie, she said, and ran up the stairs. She cooked up her dew and hit in the vein in the back of her hand. Since she just started shooting, Terry had no trouble finding a vein that would pay off. In time, if she kept using, the veins would become harder and harder to hit. After shooting up part of her dope and cleaning up her works, Terry stretched out on the bed. She could feel the dope working. She lay back and stared at the ceiling as a warmth invaded her soul. It felt as though she were drifting in a sea of foam. Soon, the foam enveloped her in a mist of well-being, and her sordid surroundings became an illusion. Her world now became the world of dreams, devoid of fears, pleasing to the senses. As long as the dope she had on the dresser lasted, she would drift through an infinite time, boundless, with no regard to past or future. This concludes this part of the miniseries on Ralph Reads. I would like to thank you, queens and kings, fellow royalty, for stopping by. You can connect with me via Twitter and Instagram, as well as Periscope at rgmc2407. Drop me an email over to rgmc2407@gmail.com. If you would like to leave a small donation, you may do so at paypal.me/rgmc2407 or the Cash App. My cash tag is rgmc2407. You may also find me on my very own channel, RGMC, Ralph Garcia, Master of Ceremonies, as well as right here at home on the United Ronin Networks. We are Ronin. Fellow royalty, pick up a good book, read a good story, and set your good self free. I appreciate you, and I love you like cooked food. I will see you folks on the next edition of Ralph Reads Adenagenasiki.
Money bring the bitches, but the bitches bring the beef. So like the Wayne, boy, I stay with the heat. You can catch me in the street, yeah, you know I got the toast. And yeah, I'm getting money, selling butter on the low.
Can't tell a shit since the jugger's teed up. Smoke half the pack and I couldn't re-up. Remember we was down, asked the ops, now we up. You ain't take no L's, you was never fucked.